You read a document.
Very well.
Have different lawyers. Have three different lawyers read the same document. and come up with different opinions.
You only got three different.
But
New model.
oh, that's so true.
It's an understatement.
There's some water. Oh, you got.
Well,
But it was power. Okay, you should be good.
Ready? Okay. The countdown is on, but it looks like it's 5:30 almost. So let's go ahead and get started. Can you guys hear us back there? Okay. I want to welcome everybody to the Royse City Council Special Work Session for May 30th, 2023. Time is 5:30. We'll be in a second. We are here and joined by Council Member Joe Paul, Council Member Wilson, Council Member Jackson, Council Member Skadden, who's on Zoom, Council Member Sophie Paul. Thank you for joining us today. Today's topic, and we need to focus on the topic and try to state a topic, is the proposed fiscal year 2024 budget. And with that, we're going to turn the time over to Brody and Amber to go ahead and kind of walk us through this conversation.
So yeah, Roy budget, I know council's all received it, I believe, maybe a couple weeks now. Kind of just blueprint for this meeting. I think I'll run through and answer some of the questions that we've received beforehand. I know that the mayor has a few topics he would like to discuss, and then after that, I think we'll just answer any other questions that the council members have that we don't get to, and after that, it's really kind of your guys' meeting. So there was a question that came up about the Arts Council being added to the organizational chart. They are essentially part of the legislative budget. So in the budget, it's not like they have their own budget, they're part of the legislative budget, but they are recognized by our city code. So that would just really be up to the council if we think we want to add them to our organizational chart. That chart found on page 4.
Are we supposed to ask questions when that topic comes up at this time?
Your
Okay.
meeting, sure.
I was just wondering, I didn't see any other like volunteer organizations that were separated out on the org chart, and so I just wasn't sure where that fit in. If we do that, does that mean it would kind of be set the ball rolling for possibly separating out other volunteer councils and stuff? I don't know, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, in that same vein, with it being a volunteer position, they're not paid. There's no compensation. So, I mean, I look and we don't even have, as an example, we don't have like planning commission, even though they're paid. It's just known that they're rolled up and under community and economic development under the planning and zoning. So I don't know if necessarily we need to throw Arts Council in.
What were you thinking, Mayor, in regards to that, or what would the benefit be? How would it help, do you think?
I think the only reason why I asked the question is municipal code specifically calls out that Royse City has an arts council. No other organization, okay, is found that I could find inside of our municipal code. But our council has to be there in order for us to be able to apply for grants. And that was the primary reason why it was placed in there. And so it's identified by municipal code. And much like everything else in here, our boards, our commission, everything else is basically, RDA board. That's bound by municipal code, certainly our planning commission, certainly all the other functions outlined in the organizational charts. The only one that's that I could find that is listed in municipal code, but not in the organizational structure was the Arts Council. There's no other reason for us to put it in there except to say, yeah, it makes sense, or simply says, doesn't make any sense. I certainly do not care either way.
Yeah, should we go back and I mean, I guess what are other municipalities doing? Do they have their arts council listed in their org chart? I mean, if we base it off of the body of our peers, are they appearing there as well? If not, like I said, we all understand that it falls under legislative, so I don't know necessarily if we need to include it.
It's really just kind of a judgment call. If you think it's value, put it in. If you don't, leave it as it is. That was really the heart of the purpose. It's just that municipal code does call it, and they are funded, in essence, in this case, through the legislative portion of the budget. So let me just ask the question. Andy brings a good point, and maybe Diane to the point too. If you start one, the second oldest to bound to others. Good point. I guess the question would be does anybody feel like there's really a need to put it in there? And if the answer is no, let's leave it as it is. I'm okay with that.
It doesn't cost us not having it in there to not get grants still for the art council. So
No, it's just, when it comes to the budget, the organizational chart will just simply reflect those organizations that, in my opinion, are driven by municipal code. That is all, okay? And that's really all it is, just driven by municipal code. Arts Council's not in there, and yet it's driven by municipal code. But it doesn't change the budget, doesn't change responsibility, doesn't change anything except that you show an organizational structure in there. And if you say, hey, well, it's really a minor issue, then fine, let's just leave it out. If you think it's worth conversation, put them in. But it takes 3 votes. What would you like to do?
I don't feel overwhelmingly moved to add it.
No.
I don't have, maybe the full understanding of it, but I don't find myself moved for that. But I think it was nice. Thank you for mentioning that, in municipal code, that, we have to have it for the grants. I hadn't realized that.
Yeah.
So
They're in there.
thank you.
Okay, then I'll take it. We just don't change. You okay with that?
The next question that was submitted, I'm actually gonna save till last.
Yeah.
But there's a question about on page 25 of the budget, basically there's an infrastructure project for 6,000 south curb gutter sidewalk. The question was, where will this take place? And the answer is that this project is stated to fall after the roundabout is done. So it will coincide, once the roundabout is complete, then it will kind of tie in all the other curb gutter sidewalks around in that area and then fix a couple of different areas. That's kind of the scope of that project. The
Okay,
roundabout,
just on 6,000. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
and the roundabout is hopefully supposed to start this fall. On page 27, there's a question came up about the $300,000 that's in there for the ramp grant with pickleball court. With kind of the question or comment about inflation, and that project has seemed to have gone up. When's our start time? We are still working on that, and it should start this summer. That's our plan.
Let me just make a comment. And it's always hard from my perspective. And it seems like pickleball courts always seem to be the topic. City Council, Brad Hilton, him and I were sitting next to each other in city council meeting 6-7 years ago. A year earlier, the city council approved to put the pickleball courts in Emma Russell. They were funded a year early. And those pickleball courts set for over a year. Nothing happened. I turned to Brad, sitting in the council meeting. I said, Brad, I simply says, we're supposed to have these courts started last year when the price was less. And now it's maybe this year, and it's going to cost more. Inflation was running 10-12%. And Brad said, and I said in the city council meeting, he says, when are we going to get started on those pickleball courts? They were funded and approved by the city council a year earlier. Here's my point. Okay. And it's like anything else. When the budget was approved, if the city can move out on that budget, and do their best to get that done, then the funding that is available to get the project done usually, hopefully comes in with the estimates. But in this case, we have to add more money because because we delayed. And all I'm suggesting is, we have been talking about pickleball courts in George Wallen North Park last year. And we're still talking about it going into this year.
Wasn't part of the problem is we didn't have enough funding to fund what the original project, the scope of the project.
It depends, good comment, it depends in terms of where you say the funding. Because when we walked out of the last budget meeting, let me just make it clear to you what is in there. What was in there as of June 30th last year. In the general fund balance, and Amber, you can help me with this because I asked you the question if I got it wrong. There were $4.7 million sitting in there in the fund balance in just the general fund. In the capital project fund, just under recreation alone was 115,000, but in the general fund of the capital project fund, there was 5.7 million. That's over $10 million that was sitting there, walking from last fiscal year into this fiscal year. Taking what the ramp fund was going to pay, which is what they provided was half of the cost. We certainly could have, as a council, if we'd have been approached, is simply, would you be willing to invest another 100,000, 200,000, whatever the matching fund would have been from the fund balance, or at least on the project, capital project fund, to finish it and get the funding done in this fiscal year. Now, it is now going into next fiscal year. And luckily, at least the ramp funds allow us to go at least an initial year if we have to, and we'll be in a second year. But in my opinion, okay, I think we could have got this thing done last fall. At least got the groundbreaking and started. Now we're not going to probably see anything until, my opinion, probably won't be able to use until spring. But the funding was certainly available to cover that cost. The challenge, Councilman, was you probably were not given that option to consider. And I think we have to offer that so you can make a decision. Yes, we're going to invest in that to finish it, or we're not. I don't think you've got it in there.
When I have a comment on that, I think in a normal year, when we weren't dealing with the complex, I think they would have brought it and said, here it is, but looking at the dealings, what we were dealing with anyway, do you think that had a little bit to do with it?
Well, it could. And certainly that is the challenge I think we have anytime we delay these projects. I remember talking, and Ross, I don't want to put you on the spot, but you're closer to the action. I heard the Region 1 UDOT director tell me in my face, he said that it's not uncommon that the inflationary factor that takes place between year to year is anywhere from 10 to 12%. And so whatever it cost us to put them in last year, just add another 10 to 12% on top of that. And so now we're not trying to find $300,000 in matching fund. Now we got to find $400,000. Or, which is what we've been now talking about, is we're talking about reducing the project. Or we're asking for volunteers to come in. I'm just saying is, and it was a comment, not a question. Question would be is if that budget gets approved and that budget says, please go up there and put a pickleball court in because it got approved to do a pickleball this next 12 months, then I would say to the city, make it happen. Okay, just make it happen.
Right, because we have cement donated, plus we have a really good price for what we don't have donated. And so are we still gonna try to go for 8 or just 4? 8.
As I heard, we're still going for 8.
Is
If you're
it
gonna
maybe
build
we-
them, I'd go 8, but that's.
It's like I talked to Brody earlier today, maybe do it all we can with the money from this budget, and maybe not have the fencing or the lighting until maybe the next budget, or just to make it all work out.
You have pickleball courts without fencing though.
And the
Go
guy
on.
that I talked to from Roy, who lives in Roy, he said or maybe just certain along, the main roads have the fencing there. So you don't want balls going out in the road or whatever. But he said he'd give us a bill on the fencing through his, contractors and stuff, so.
Let's remember one thing though, if you do approve, we'll move forward in July 1st. Roy Days is August.
Or no?
We don't.
Right.
Yeah, you gotta wait till
But you
after
wouldn't
Roy
start
gets-
till after
Well,
Roy.
you're
does.
back, but the mayor said for spring before we.
Right.
I mean, it just as a matter of best practice going forward, should we, when we put in for our ramp grant, throw in a 10 to 15% buffer if that's what we're seeing in terms of like these types of costs? Just so we're not in this same predicament down the road, just thinking out loud.
No, that's a good point, Randy. It certainly should be considered, but I think the harder question would be is, tell me why we don't have a set of 4 or 6 or 8 pickleball courts now sitting in George Walden North Park today. Because you all approved it last year. And you're now asked to do another approval going into this year. You got a ramp grant of funding approved last year. And we're carrying that over. I'd like to say to you, Randy, I'd like to say, it says, here's the reason why we didn't do anything. I don't have a clue why we didn't do anything. And there could be justification for that. But I'm saying to you would be is that it's going to cost us more now than it would have cost us last year had we basically got that thing started, which the city was approved to get started. So I'm not going to throw blame at anybody. I'm just saying is, please understand that when we choose not to do it, or if there's a circumstances not to do, and you delay that, the cost goes up. Almost without exception, the price is going to go up unless you get, as you did, and helped us to get volunteer services or volunteer materials to try to offset the cost. Anyway, it was a comment, Brody. It certainly was not a question, but it certainly warrants us keep thinking about making sure that once it gets approved, we just need to make sure it gets done.
Can we maybe go on in that same area? If we look at page 26. And then also at page 50, it kind of goes back and forth to the aquatic leisure pool liner at 725. For 725. I was just wanted to bring up the concept. So I'd heard that we need to replace the toy at the aquatic center, and that because it's kind of a more visible item, there's a better chance we could get ramp grant to help us with that. But I was thinking that if we could combine the toy with the liner, maybe that combo, we could submit a ramp grant. That way we're still getting a little bit of help with the liner in addition to help with the toy. And I don't know if that's something that, because if we do that, we plan for it, then the ramp grant we'd have the answer for it by the time we would be putting the liner in anyway, and whether or not we do the toy immediately. I just wanted to talk about that and see what would need to be done to possibly take advantage of that opportunity. Because oftentimes by itself, they may not cover the liner, but with a combination they may. I don't know, Amber, what that takes. Does that mean we throw in an extra amount, or 725 is enough for that, or how? I don't know what that would entail.
So I don't know enough about ramp grants to know how that works with throwing it in there if it's less likely to be approved. I just know they were like, we're gonna do the liner and then hope we can do a ramp grant with the toy, because even that's not guaranteed, but we have to replace the liner. And the 725 is the estimated cost for the liner.
But if they say no, we'd still replace the liner, right? But if they say yes, then we're luck out. Or
So, yeah, I don't know who,
Yeah, we
anything
can
about ramp
definitely do it
grants.
both ways, and we can try and make it one project, and we have the 725 there enough to cover the liner. And then if we don't use it all, that would be great. But
When are you anticipating doing the liner?
After this season. Probably if we can get them in this fall, we will. That's what we like to, but if we can, it'd be spring.
Is it the toy like the little teeny, like frog toy thing? Were you talking
No.
about?
great
the
big,
big-
the big
Oh,
snatchers. Big
So that
snatchers.
needs to be replaced, huh?
so, yeah, we can do it both ways. I mean, obviously, if we got a grant that helped us with both the toy and the liner, then in theory, we would have plenty of money there to do that.
Do we have an estimate on the toy?
Around 250.
And I'm gonna ask, what's wrong with our toy now? Like, I go and it looks okay, but I'm not seeing
I'm not playing on
whatever.
it.
The underneath. part.
Right, I've not been on it for a
The
minute.
part you don't see.
It's the underneath that sits in the water. It's not staying still. It's starting to rust and rot out. So
Okay. So can you fix or not fix? not fixed, okay.
But it'll last, it's ain't gonna fall down this year,
No,
right?
yeah, we'll-
Don't send the
We
grants
probably
down.
can.
So I mean, if we budget for the liner, we could submit a ramp grant, what, at the first of the year and see if we can get that and do the liner. Is there any benefit of doing them at the same time?
No, it's two different companies, so.
So when you put the liner in, can you put the toy on top of it after the fact? So what if we didn't have a toy for a minute? Just saying. If we didn't get the ramp grant and we didn't have a toy for a minute, I would hate to put the
There's so much
liner
plumbing
in
that comes
with the
underneath
old.
it, though, to run the water to the slides and the buckets and
Okay.
everything. So it would be,
So you'd have to do it together,
we'll
really.
keep the one we have right now. but
Okay, but what if it was a different design? You'd have a liner that was built and made for something that doesn't fit with a new toy. Am I right? Am I thinking about this right or not?
The liner or the toy just goes on, sits down on the liner. They
Okay.
Come in and make it, but all the plumbing from different places comes up.
Comes up through the.
I mean, if they want to
through the
do
liner.
it,
Okay.
we can't do away with it, we just need the plumbing sticking up out of it.
Okay,
I mean, while we're on the subject, I've found more and more over time, the value in the complex and the aquatic center. I'm also finding more and more over time, the expense in it. Looking at comparable facilities, we potentially are lower priced than other facilities for entry. And looking back when we had the meetings of all the people that were interested in keeping the complex open and knowing that we're regional assets, even though they're in Roy, we're the only ones that have the aquatic center in the complex. I would recommend going forward that we look at a fee structure, do a comparison of other cities, other amenities out there, and also look at something where when we do it in a budget, it's all on the back of Roy residents. There's a lot of non-Roy residents. So can we offset some of the expenses by changing the fee structure for non-residents? Maybe incentivize non-residents to buy a bigger pass or something like that. So we're recouping it because like I said, I found the value in it and people are passionate about it, but we also need to try to figure out a way to enhance the revenue performance.
We raised the prices last year, right?
Yeah, we did.
And then the price to rent.
I mean, yeah.
We can do, I mean,
I thought we only raised like the nightly rental rate. I don't think we actually raised like entrance fees, did we?
No, we did.
it was just
Well, I
the,
remember.
It might have been the year before that, but
Might have been the year
recently.
before. I just know we've raised it since
Recently.
I've been on council, because I remember talking about it with Travis.
Yeah,
how we-
but yeah, if,
I can't remember how much. It might have just been $1 or 50 cents. I can't remember.
if three council members tell us to do a study, we'll get it ready.
Here's what I suggest we do, you know, have the city or have Rody send you a copy of the current fee structure for rental and daily access. Look at that, okay? Come back to us and as an agenda item, okay, at the city council meeting, it has to be formalized there. And then make a proposal that says, hey, I think this is a fair. You can certainly go up there, Joe, and look at other similar, see what those are. To be able
Well,
to
and in all fairness too, we've got a new Parks and Rec director coming on board. It'd be good to tap her into this process,
I'd
but
say set up a.
I
time.
just wanted to set the stage that we need to start thinking about
The
that.
key would be, so it gets into, because if the council approves a fee schedule change, that'll change the revenue stream in the budget. You can kind of do that after the fact. But if we wanted to do that, you got a June, the first Tuesday in June or the third Tuesday in June. To have that approved and ready to go.
And we may not be able to get it for this budget cycle or this year, but I know with the complex opening that, and we have made a
for next.
you know,
year.
not only on the back of the residents, but there's been sizable grants, there's been sizable donations. I think we need to.
I think we definitely need to charge more for the complex when that opens. I think people will expect to pay more having a nice new facility, but we can't charge more this year, in my opinion, for the aquatic center. I mean, that's like when I went to the Knoll Road and it went up to $2. I'm like, what the heck? You know, and so you had $1 in your wallet or, I don't know. I just think people know how much to give their kids to go to the aquatic center, and there's some kids in that neighborhood that go there all the time. I just think that's something we really need
Yeah.
to.
That's
we
why I
just
say,
can't
I'm
do
just
it.
planting the seed.
We need. to-
Complex is gonna be opening.
Right.
Next year for the aquatic center. We'll still be in. When it opens next year, we'll still be in this budget cycle.
Right, because
Yeah.
when they see if we get a new toy and they see if we get new liners, like, where do you think that money comes from? So I think when people see improvements and it's taken care of, and they're gonna see a beautiful complex, people are gonna pay for the service.
Yeah, the secret, and appreciate both comments, bring up great ideas. The step that you need to take is you just simply says, get the fee schedule. And then come back to the council with a recommendation. Certainly involve the new director. And certainly I would ask you either have staff do it, or you can do it. See what the similar capacities, capabilities are being provided outside of Roy, so you can do a little comparison. I think what I heard from Joe was, didn't want to carry the load on the backs of residents. But there's a cost for non-residents and residents for both facilities, whether you rent them at night or whether you use them in the day. Take a look at that. Come back with a recommendation. If 3 votes in this council said, let's go, it helps staff to go ahead and implement that fee change.
Yeah, I can see charging more, renting the aquatic center and I think it'd be so hard. Kids don't come with any idea, try to charge somebody.
I think you
More
have to
money.
do it on your honor.
Yeah,
know,
you
when
do,
I-
Yeah.
but there's a lot of, I work in high school, I know what kids are gonna say. And they'll use their friend's address or, I mean, that's probably a lot of kids that do, but. I don't know, I think it's a hard thing to prove, don't you think, Ross?
Because it's
Yeah.
mostly kids and we don't know, how do we know? Yeah, they don't
Yeah.
have ID, so.
I mean, I tried that once clear back at Marine Land in California and told my daughter I wanted to get her in cheaper. And then they asked her when her birthday was, and then I kind of stumbled there like, nice try, lady, you're paying the full price. And so I think kids mostly will be truthful. If you say, where do you live? You know, and their mom might train them before you get there. Okay, if you live, give me your grandma's address. I don't know.
Everything you say is absolutely
Anything to
true.
save $1, so
But at the end of the day, if you're going to raise those rates,
it'd be for everything.
you have to make that decision.
I'm gonna share my screen real quick because this is the cool thing. Welcome to my world. Let me show you. I just asked basically Google's version of ChatGPT. Basically like the fee structure that we've had at the complex for the past, it looks like 4 years. Back in 2019, the day pass was $3. 2020, we increased it to $4. 2021, it's up to $5. 2022, $6, and now we're projected to be at $7 for 2023. And then this also falls in line with like the 10 punch passes. It does look like we have increased those over the course of the last little while. So we have been continually increasing the fee structure at the complex. So again, it's like where do we stop at as far as that's concerned?
I'm not gonna question your data, but everybody in the room shaking their head that they don't think we're charging.
Non-resident.
I don't think so either. No, I think it's more of a blended rate, but I do believe we're somewhere in the $5 to $6 range. And again, it calls out that it's for non-residents paying higher prices as well.
But then as you look at it, you offer, discounted passes. Then you try to get them to buy 10 or 15 or 20 at a time, punch pass. Anyway, I didn't mean to go down a rabbit hole. I just wanted to plant the seed that something we need to think about.
Yeah, I think we do too.
And then the next part that goes along with it is, Amber, I really liked your recommendation that could we go back to the save a little bit every year. So it's there when we need it. I didn't see that in here. Is that in here? That was just an idea. So what would it take for us to incorporate that into this budget? Because I think that's a very important comment that you made. I think that principle is very critical.
Yeah, so back in, I believe it was 2005, I'm not sure on the exact year, but they did raise property taxes specifically for fire equipment. And 185,000, I believe. So it was kind of like, you need to find a revenue stream that is now specifically designated for this purpose. And so back then it was, we're going to use taxes to fund this revenue stream. Now, that's always an option that we do that for this purpose, or if there's another revenue stream you can think of, certainly it comes from like the prices on the tickets, but even if you raise them $1, it's not going to be enough to afford a pool liner in a year. And even on that same discussion, I think the fire station or the fire amount, Craig, is probably low at this point, right? Because that was now 15 years ago. And if we're putting 185,000 away a year, that's great, but we probably need to increase that a little bit as well. So it just needs to be thought of like, what do these amounts need to be? And are we willing to raise property taxes for those specific purposes? And then this much goes for this and this much goes for this. And it's held in the capital improvements fund, and that's all it can be used for. But it could be used for playground equipment, complex, and the outdoor pool. So for example, if you have a structure at a park, like Municipal Park, I know is needing a new toy, those are around $300,000. It could be used for that as well. So, I mean, we came up with some numbers. I'm thinking even like $85,000 a year to cover, playground, aquatic center, and the complex would be a great start to replace those things.
If I remember right, recreation does already have in that same truth and taxation meeting, I think the decision was to do just that. Not only fire a certain amount, 80 some odd thousand, but there's also a portion went into recreation.
It stopped several years ago.
Did it already stop?
Yes, and I don't know when exactly that stopped, but it's not going in there
Okay.
now.
Then to your point, there might be a conversation you might want to have about reactivating that. And then now setting aside a certain amount of property tax funding that goes specifically targeted to, in this case, whether it be fire, whether it be recreation. So you have that pot of money always going in there to be able to accommodate whatever these kind of decision make. Because it's always going to be there, always going to be demands. And having a slush fund that you can draw from makes it much easier.
I think it kind of goes along with the COLA concept. We had such difficult time, and the COLA kind of hopefully is to prevent some of those traumatic situations. And so I guess that means because the budget's balanced now, that means something else would have to give if we add it now. Is there anything that you had in mind when you suggested that, or any area, or?
The simplest answer is a property tax increase, especially for the fire department, because that's what property taxes pay for is public safety service. Yeah. So, and I would say, I would make the same argument for recreation, right? That's what our taxes go for, is to provide parks and recreation to the public. So that seems the simplest answer. I know it's not always the most popular one in the room. But even the fire truck that we just paid for, the 1.3 million, that didn't end up coming out of their fund balance because they just didn't have it. So we're putting that money away every year, and we still couldn't use it to pay for the fire truck that we just bought.
Wasn't enough in
There wasn't enough in there to pay for that. Now, it did pay for like their ambulances,
Right.
but yeah, so we are falling short on that one as well.
You just need to be thinking, if you want to do that, then you have to go back into a truth and taxation, and you have to you gotta look at a property tax adjustment. And that's gonna be, you have to be thinking through that process.
So the other revenue stream is sales tax, and from what I'm seeing is a modest increase year over year. Can some of that be budgeted towards it?
It could for sure. The thing with sales tax increase kind of on the same level that inflation increases. So the thing, as that goes up, our inflation goes up as well. So they're kind of equal. So it's hard to designate, especially because if that were to go down, now what do? We're putting away, a certain amount of money every year. If sales tax declines, do we take that away? You have to have that discussion.
Most of our sales tax come from our 4 grocery stores.
Yes.
Yeah. So I can't ever see that really, anything probably go up as much as everything costs, and we'll always have that.
Yes, but I think here's the secret. You have 2 revenue streams we're talking about. Property tax as a constant. Its purposeness, it really is to provide a steady income to the city, but it does come with consequences. Sales tax, certainly the best option, because sales tax is the preponderance of our taxes that we gain. And so this one, the sales tax revenues is influenced by the economy. Property tax doesn't, for the most part. If in fact, correct me if I'm wrong, but if the property value drops, and they can drop, then the rate adjusts so that the city gets the same amount of property tax. It's kind of it's a sad story, but that's the process. And so if the property value goes up, then the rate drops proportionally. And so you get about the same amount. So it's a constant. Amber's saying is, if you will make a decision and make a condition in a property tax conversation, in a decision, that a certain portion of that property tax increase will be designated specifically to recreation, it makes no difference how much property tax going forward, it will always be separated out. It's kind of like your Class C road funds. We get about $1.2 million in Class C road funds. Ross spends all that money, but he cannot spend that money on anything except the road. I think he curb and gutter or something. But that's it. He cannot take that and buy recreational stuff. So the point really is that it's earmarked specifically. You have the authority to do that same thing. If you want to do that, that'll always put a pot of money in the hands of the recreation that's building every year for these kinds of expenses. But it takes you to adjust the property tax and put a statement in that says this is going to be earmarked specifically for this revenue for this particular job. And it sounds like from what Amber says, you may even put a time limit. You can run it 10 years or 15 years, however long you want it to run.
But we're gonna be losing property taxes because they're taking all them homes and businesses out.
But look at all the new homes we're
But
getting.
yeah, well, we're gonna
Yeah,
be getting all
doesn't-
that north side Grumman. One of these, you know, within hopefully a couple years and that'll bring in some
Let's
property.
go back
tax.
to my comment that Amber. If this is the amount of money you have in property tax revenue, and when they do the recalculations and the amount drops, then they'll recompute the rate so that they bring the rate individual up so you get that same amount. They will self-adjust. The secret is bring more development in to basically because it's adding value and you can actually gain money by just simply bringing more development in. But if it drops, it's the only stable revenue you have, and so it will self-correct itself, so you have a pretty stable revenue. I don't like the system, but I'll tell you, it seems to be about the only thing that seems to work. At least it guarantees you'll have money you can spend on property tax, which is why Amber made a point, which is kind of hard to believe, but it's actually true. If it was done right, all public safety would be paid on the back of property tax
Well,
because it's stable.
I just remember going 10%. How the outcry was for that.
Yeah.
I remember the outcry at 37%.
Been through both of them.
Yeah, I did.
But there's also an outcry when we have to close the complex because it's falling apart. So if we have money to put away, we can keep the facilities from getting to that point. Where we're talking about closing them. It's more the upkeep.
Living paycheck to paycheck. I'm not sure what money on it.
Yeah.
So think about it. It certainly is there. We'll take your idea. I think we can take that one there. But the one you're proposing or what's on the table really needs to be thought through. I will just make this comment in a public meeting. An election year is not the time to be talking about property tax increase. Okay, I'll leave it with that.
Well, like you were saying though, there's other options. We can take the sales tax that we like every year. The last 2 years I've had the discussion with Matt. We have this excess amount. Why can we not earmark that and say, we have this much money this year. Okay, so maybe next year, we don't know how much, if any increase at all. Why can't we start there?
Well, we do anything over, because we have to have a certain amount of fund balance in there.
Right.
And if we are over that, we do put that into capital projects to fund these types of things.
Okay, so we do have a little bit, we do put away,
Yes.
5.7
and that's
million.
where it is. Okay, I thought you said we didn't have any. money.
Well, we're not putting away, we're not specifically putting away any year.
Earmarking.
We're saying if we happen to have any left over this year, we'll put it away.
But it's there.
Because at one
Okay.
time there was a lot of money in there for the complex, but then it got used.
But we used it, and that's what it was there for. So now we just have to build that back up again,
Yeah, you will just have
Okay.
years that you don't necessarily have.
So,
some,
but
and
it's
you don't
there.
Save any that year.
already with the same thing. Okay,
So does that mean that in a situation like this where we are anticipating, property tax increase, you would say, okay, if sales tax is above this level, that amount will go to this pot as opposed to the general one, or could you say it goes to a specific pot?
We could, usually we just put it in the general so that we can, for example, use it for the fire truck when we needed it, instead of specifically earmarking it for this, when maybe we might not need it. And instead of just looking at sales tax alone, we look at the entire pot, including revenues and expenditures. So if expenditures are way down and we end up having a lot over, we can send that over there.
So you could say if it's above this much, so much goes to fire, so much goes to Parks and Rec, but
You could, but if you just
But if
say
the
if
other,
it's
but then that
general-
comes, does that come down to a vote at the time to be able to do that? Or, because what I'm saying, if it's already earmarked, sometimes it's easier to use it. If it's in a big pot,
Mhm.
then sometimes that's where more of the contention conflict comes in.
Mhm.
And it's harder to do that.
My opinion to this, Amber can verify this. You earmark it through a truth and taxation conversation. It's gonna be there as long as that money is there. So if you say it's a 5-year requirement or a 10-year requirement, it's gonna take this amount of money out of the property tax and put it in recreation, it will go in there, irregardless of how many changes take place in city council members. Because all it takes is 3 different votes in an election, a different election, and you got 3 different votes. That recreational dollars put in a truth and taxation locks that up. Here's the difference. You got $5.7 million sitting today. If you want to take $1 million out of that and you says, I'm going to put that to buy that toy, put it in there. That money's there for you to decide. That's the project money. You could do that today. You don't have to earmark money away. It's sitting right there today. You can do the same thing next year, but just recognize if there's a different set of votes out of the city council, because you've got different members, it can change in the next election.
Of the 5.7, what percentage of that, what percent are we running at of our rainy day?
Well, you got $4.7 million of rainy day general fund. We set a limit of 18%. We will not drop. And the law said 35%. That said you can't go over 35% of your budget. So anything that goes over, she said, she just dropped it into the capital fund. Capital project. So rather than breaking the law, she'll take the excess, right, Amber? And you'll put it in the capital project fund.
We try to keep it approximately around 18%. I think we were at maybe 20 when it all came down to it. I'm not sure on the exact amount, but we do try to keep it around the 18%.
Well, there's something else that's gonna come down with the complex. I mean, to finish it off, it's probably gonna be another $150,000 to $200,000. Fortunately, we did get a sizable ramp grant. We've got great donations. We're still more money out of non-resident taxes than we are out of resident taxes. So, I mean, you start picking that apart and it starts falling fast.
The nice thing about it, as soon as Ross finishes up, it should be done. And it should give us the 15 or 20 years we need. Now, the question is going to be is, and I've heard people in the school district say it's going to be longer than 20 years, so we'll let that work its path. The question you have to ask would be is, and it's a conversation you will have, you want to finish it. And Ross is going to come back to you with a plan that says this is what it's going to cost to finish it. Now, the fact that we haven't paid labor in there, and if they were here, they would say that we put a budget together last year that's, I think it was $1.3 million. I'd have to go back and see what that number was, but there was a lot of money you budgeted, and we haven't spent but a fraction of that on labor. And the way I see it is some of that money, it's already budgeted this year. They've spent some of that money to help get this complex back into the game. Let's see what it comes out at the end, and then you guys have to make a choice.
So for the toy, we apply for a ramp grant. If we don't get it, there's money in the rainy day fund if
you
have
have
it
to.
done.
But as you indicated, the fall will submit the request, and then sometime in that, I think it's January timeframe, I have to go back to my notes. January, February, whenever it is, and then they'll make a decision to basically for ramp requests. And we've been doing very well. The people who've submitted the ramp requests have done very well for Royce City. We just put it in there. That certainly meets the qualifications.
So that's pretty much what Travis does a lot of the ramp grants, doesn't he? Travis Lynn.
For the parks and
Yeah,
stuff,
for the parks.
for all of my stuff.
For the aquatic center, would he be doing that one for that, or for that, something you do?
Either Travis would do it. Or the new lady or whoever.
Oh, yeah.
Or Brody.
We have quite a few people that work
Yeah.
on it. Travis is great, but
Yeah.
Okay, about the next question on 56?
Yeah, the next question, essentially is a question about the new sewer lift station.
What?
Sewer lift station over by Randy's neighborhood.
Yeah.
I'm very interested in this.
You can't flush your toilet, Randy, sorry.
That is- Currently, our plan is to send that out to bid this fall. Currently, it's with the state department of whoever that has to approve all of those. We're waiting final approval.
DEQ,
I think so.
DEQ, environmental quality.
Thank you.
Let's see if I can interpret what I think I just heard. The question here is, we're gonna take a rate increase on the Central Weber Sewer District. We're not gonna do it on the Davis North Sewer District. So those who are on the 900 somewhat people that are basically on the east side of 1900 are gonna take a sewer increase. Okay, that's what the budget says. The hope was, if we can get the lift station in time, then it will take, we talk about sewer this way, but that's how it is. We're gonna take the crap and we were gonna move it across 1900 and dump it into North Davis. That's our plan.
4,000.
And therefore, nobody in Roy will be under the Central Weber Sewer District. We're gonna move all of their stuff. Go ahead, man, you can carry this on. We're gonna move all that stuff over to this North Davis Sewer District. And therefore, there would not be an increase. I was hoping that we would have that done before take too much of that, but at this point, it looks like we're probably they're gonna have to pay for it, at least this next year, according to the budget, before the new lift station will be in place and be able to move that stuff. That makes sense?
You're looking at a year.
Yeah. Okay, so you've answered my question. Okay, sorry. That's a smelly subject, Diane. I'm just telling you.
Ever want a tour down there? I'll show you how smelly it is.
So on page 59 of the budget, there were some questions for the capital assets regarding 5 new trucks.
Yeah.
2 of those trucks are what we call the rotation trucks that are bought and sold yearly. The other 3 are essentially replacing trucks for the water department. They're used by the water department and then also used as our smaller plow vehicles. They're all very old and just need to be replaced.
They're not going to the in a rotation strategy, but
The 3 of them. One of them,
just normal replacement.
the one with the rack, one with the rack, meter truck and plow truck. And then
Let's go to page 58, back one page. I had a question under departments where it says operations division. I just wasn't quite sure what the under capital. So 2023 budget was 1.5 million. The change is another 1.5 million, and I'm just not quite sure what that 1,498,000 is. Can you just
Yeah, the biggest increase is due to the lift station. So they
Okay.
typically do about 1.5 million in capital upgrades every year, and then we're adding in 1.5 million to this lift station this year.
okay? Thank you.
I did have a question when we were talking about vehicles.
And that is ARPA funds, right?
Yes.
On page 50, we talked about the public works rotation vehicles, the 7 detective vehicles. Now, I know we can't budget revenue that we don't have, but we will get money back off those 7. Are those 7 additional or are those?
No, those are
7?
part of their rotational ones. So yes, they do sell them and we get money, but I don't know, not very much. Not a ton. No.
They've about worn them out by the time they're done with them.
Yeah. So this is another thing when we talk about money in the capital projects, it also needs to pay for this. So when we're putting whatever money we save each year, when we're putting that in here, it does have to cover things like this as well.
There's a question on page 65, basically the $50,000 to repair the Meadow Creek Fish Pond Island. Basically what's happening is as the water fluctuates, it's kind of pulling down some of the sides. So we have to go in and essentially raise that island 2 feet. And kind of put some of those sides back together.
Does it need a pool liner to help?
I have enough water.
Yeah, good idea.
So the water's eroding and it's just pulling it down and you just have to rebuild and restack.
Yeah.
Okay, makes sense. 86,
Page 86. This is, another $50,000. It's for the 4,000 South Detention Basin upgrade. The state requires essentially, to comply with the state, we have to have a little bit bigger of a retention basin right there. We're also planning on making some improvements, basically, so it looks better for in case any new things come in that area.
Like the cemetery.
I just said new thing. So. But the bottom line is the state requires it based on their factor to have a little bit bigger than we have there. And so Ross's guys have figured out how to get that done.
Can we back up a couple of pages?
You can go wherever you guys want.
72, this just needs one. Covered dumpsters for public works, are those like the big orange ones we're using?
It's the ones that we, with the EPA standards that
How many is that?
we put it before.
It's $100,000, is that?
They're 20-something thousand feet, so.
you got covers?
And that's because we pretty much have to move to all of that because of the problems, right? So all of them will eventually have that then. Okay.
So
And
it's
then-
not actually a new dumpster, it's a cover for the dumpster?
I had new ones.
Yeah.
Oh, they
What do
will
you
be
do with the
new?
old ones.
They're all gonna be new. Old ones, they're gonna just sit around, we'll use them all dirt. So.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so they're completely new, not just house. Okay,
We,
thanks.
we have trucks that can use all those dumpsters for dirt. You just can't put garbage in them.
So how many do we have right now?
15.
And so where do they get made at? Where do they come from when we get a new one?
American Fork down that way.
Oh, so in state, so.
And then, since we're going back, how about page 69? In regards to the dumpsters. The second paragraph down talks about the budget and included expanding the neighborhood cleanup from 4 weeks per year to 16 weeks per year during the summer months and I guess I wasn't exactly sure what that entailed. I mean, we've got the 2 weeks spring, 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
where does
what
that-
we discovered is that was essentially some language from an old budget document. And we need to take that out. We haven't expanded that program.
Okay.
And I think there was some talk about it a few years ago, and so it was put into the budget document, and then we put it in there by mistake, so we have to take that part out.
Okay.
16 words per year. Oh, now, yeah.
Okay. I
Dang.
hadn't remembered hearing about that, so,
Right.
okay,
Yeah.
thank
You
you.
wanna give me more help and.
And I have a question on 69. So are all the fees that we're charged with, do they go right under the residents? Is that the case on that?
Yeah, so most of the garbage fund is just what we pay to waste management and the.
Yeah, they're just pass through. Is that a good term?
Yeah, most of that department budget is just passed through. So they gave us pretty significant increases this year. On both of those.
From,
Oh, my heavens.
Page 90?
So on page 90, there's a question about the $66,667 for the dog park, and that is a carryover. Then that project, they're actually getting bids for certain things right now. They're currently working,
So has there been a change of scope on that project?
that's what they're getting bids for.
Okay.
And if we change the scope of that, we'll bring it to council.
Is it we approved something last year that they put some new things in down there? I don't.
No, that's what that is, and
And they haven't, so I haven't done anything down there yet.
But new things at the bottom of the detention basin, it's underwater, how many months of the year? I. We'll wait till it comes back, but I think it needs to be re-voted on.
Okay.
We have plenty of grass other places that we can make some amenities.
There was only one other question I had and didn't get in here, page 55. If you just want to swing real quick to that. Before we jump into the last topic. I mentioned to Ross before y'all walked in, Page 55, second paragraph basically says one of the largest needs we foresee in the future is the additional water storage tank. The reason for that question, and then I think Ross has a good answer you need to hear. But the reason for the question would be is today we sell excess water to West Haven. We have a, I think it's a 40-year contract with them or something. It's outrageous, signed 10 years, 20 years ago. So we got 20 some odd more years on that one. Ross will tell you, we have to buy water from Weber Basin by law. I guess it's by law. I mean,
We bought it, you cannot return it.
yeah. So whether we use a gallon or we use 21 acres of pond, the reality is we pay the same. So we buy that. Ross will tell you that 11 months of the year, we use Weber Basin water to meet our culinary water requirements. Only about a month a year does he ever have to turn on the 4 main pumps that have deep wells as well as the holding tanks. So the question is, we're selling excess water today, which means we have excess water than what we really need to operate. And we have 4 deep wells that have big storage tanks in Roy today. One at Hill Air Force Base, you know where the other ones are, they're kind of spread across. And now we're asking this, and it's just a statement, there was no funding towards it, but a statement that says one of the largest needs in the foreseen in the future is to build another water tank. We got 4. We've got 4 deep wells and we give water away.
What, I think West Haven, that needs to be one of their most important things to do,
Well,
to build.
so I asked the question and Ross is going to provide us that answer.
So we have to store 370 gallons per person per resident in Roy City. We don't store that much. So if population grows, I think we store what, 9 million gallons right now. We have storage. Should have closer to 15 or 16 million. So that's basically why we want.
That all makes sense?
Yeah,
Okay.
and that would last us about how long? 370 gallons per person a day?
Basically,
I was wondering, okay,
Oh,
400 gallons a person per day or something like that.
I know what it is.
But we're throwing 300.
cow.
So we have to have it because our population hits 40,000 and when it's 40,000, we've got to have more storage. And right now we don't have enough. And guess where the plan is for that storage tank?
So I was wondering that when I read it,
4,000. We already own the property.
oh, right there.
So it'd be right next to the tank that's on flow.
Yeah.
We have to build it that. So
Okay.
if that tank fills up, it fills the other tank up.
Oh, great.
So it's just a tank, no red, we don't build it well, we don't,
We put our own superhero logo on it.
it's gonna be underground.
So when I saw in the paper that West Haven's one of the fastest growing,
Paint it on the side. and we'll fold it
Yeah.
there.
we're not giving them any more, we're not selling them anymore. They're gonna have to.
No, but if you understand the conversation we had earlier and what the mayor was just talking about, we have to buy $1 million worth of water from Weber Basin, whether we use it or not. We use that water 11 months of the year. We don't turn our wells on until November, December. So why not start selling West Haven more water to offset?
Sell it to neighboring cities, you can't sell it to.
So why not sell them more water to offset our cost of the $1 million that we have to buy from Weber Basin? You can always cut them off if we feel like we're running out, but if we're only, no.
Well, I think within 5 years, they're gonna be coming to ask for more water, are you, right? Because they're growing so fast.
Yeah, they're one of the fastest growing cities. that is-
Cooper's drilling well everywhere.
We use one drop.
Okay,
Yeah, sell it.
so that's them, they can do.
We could certainly look into that. I mean, yeah, the problem with saying that you can just cut them off though, once we contract that amount of water, like we're providing it, so. If we run out of Weaver Basin water and we use our
Yeah.
well water and there's a problem, it's not like you can say, well, we're taking this back.
And you- like you
Don't do
said-
long-term contracts,
You
but
said
maybe a
it's
year to year.
Yeah, that's a long.
And still be conservative, but offload a little bit more.
Boy, wouldn't it be great to build a house down there and say, well, you'll have water from year to year. It just depends on Roy City, how much water they have.
Start to see the problem.
Generally, West Haven wouldn't do a year-to-year contract, but we can certainly look into that.
Well, just for the record, and if you'd like to see the contract, I'll send it to you. But the record basically says if the Roy City Council decides and it's necessary to shut the water off to West Haven, you have the authority to do that. That's stipulated clearly in the contract. You have to give them like 3 months notice or
I
whatever.
remember
it is.
you read that in council meeting once.
But it clearly gives you the authority to simply says, if there's any problem, Roy City residents are first. West, or in this case, West Haven is actually second. And those deep wells, and they are deep, so they're in the aquifer. The conversation I've had, at least with the water people, is Weber River would dry up and Roy City would still have access to the aquifer water that would probably run at least another year. So there was real purpose in why they did the deep wells, and there's real purpose why they have those big tanks. And if you knew the vision of what Roy was supposed to be to where it is, the plan would be is a lot of Hooper would be Roy. And their plan was to build a water network that would feed literally a lot of Hooper, which changed because of them making a township and eventually become a city. So bottom line would be is the laws, not the law, the contract's clear. At any time that we, the danger of losing water for Roy residents, we would shut that contract off with West Haven. And then all the water would basically be provided to Roy City residents. And the city council would make that decision.
Well, whoever dug all those wells and did all that for Roy, I'm really grateful to them. I can't imagine not having water.
30 years ago.
Bingo.
Yeah. Let's hope we don't have to go there, so.
You ready to go back to 22?
Did we miss any of your questions that you asked me? I think you got most of them.
I think we got, yep.
Okay,
I think we got most of that.
so yeah, go ahead, man.
Okay. I was hoping he's gonna take this conversation. Let me just make, you've seen an email I sent to you. I certainly wanted to follow up with some information. Here's the reality. The reality is that ever since I've been in office since 2016, Roy City Council nor the mayor has seen a salary increase. And there's some reasons for that. First thing is that for the most part, I think the city council, in terms of their expenses to function as a city council, and the mayor were able to operate within the budget that's been provided. And that has been going on now for almost 7 years. The fact of the matter is that with the mayor's responsibilities, and I can't speak for you, I can only speak for me, but the mayor's responsibilities is for me to carry out the responsibilities that I have. I'm now dipping into my retirement. Okay. I should not be dipping in my retirement. I don't want to do that. And so it doesn't leave me a lot of choices in terms of saying am I going to fulfill those responsibilities that I have as mayor, or am I going to start cutting back? And that's really the choice I'm at right now. My retirement plan was to pay for my home, my other stuff. Certainly the funds and the monies I get out of salary, I pay for everything that I'm supposed to do as mayor. Now, I should tell you, so you can understand where I'm coming from. The first year I was asked to be mayor, voted as mayor, I was given a credit card. And the purpose of that credit card is that I was basically then, if I have bills that come with being mayor, I would charge them. And I never did. So I turned that card back in 2018. I don't know what year it was, but I gave it back. I was comfortable with the idea that says, is that if I have to drive to Salt Lake, if I have to attend a function, if I have to pay for a meal, whatever I have to do to be able to be mayor, I would simply do it out of my salary. I'm telling you, the duties and responsibilities of the Roy City mayor is such now that I am dipping in my own funds to be able to do the duties. And so what I propose to you, and I think I laid out a pretty good argument that suggests is the pay of the Roy City mayor, and I hope you took a look at the pay of the city council members, but certainly in terms of the things that I pointed out, it should ask you the question is, am I fairly being compensated for the service? And that's a hard question to ask. And let me make it clear. City council pays everybody in here's wage. You approve everything, including the mayor. Mayor does not have a vote. So you decide what the pay is for the salary for the mayor, and you decide the pay of the 120 people in the staff, and you decide your pay. Kind of interesting how this works. So all I can do is indicate to you what the information I have, indicate to you is where we are. And the bottom line would be is ask you to seriously think about taking advantage or at least drawing some conclusion here that suggests is that the mayor's pay wages is, in my opinion, grossly underpaid. Okay. Now, if you believe that also is an argument for you as a council, certainly I've provided you enough data for you to draw the same conclusion. But comparable, I shared it, of all of the 15 cities I laid out, I'm the 11th ranked in pay. And yet we have a population that's 4th ranked, okay, of the entire from North Salt Lake, literally to North Ogden. And the size, we're pretty big in terms of size. And then, I appreciate that, Ann, or not Ann, but the Diane, you asked some other questions. I think it's valued information. Brody's going to fill in the details. But even the issue in terms of what our general or our budget funds are, we got a pretty healthy fund. The only piece, Brody, I'm not sure of, and Amber, maybe you can help me with this one. You certainly showed the general fund being a $25 million budget, but that's not all of the funds. We have the enterprise funds, which best I can tell, there's another $13 million we're responsible for as a city to manage that. Best guess, we're sitting about a $40 million budget, okay, that you operate. A lot of investment funds, a lot of it general funds, but there's a lot of funds there. I'm just asking would be is that you would say, well, we should have got something along the way. The council every year since I've been in office has voted not to do any change, and there has been no change to our salaries.
So can there be a change to your salary, but not our salary?
You have that authority.
Yeah, because I mean, I was talking to it was almost late. I was talking to my daughter about this. And I've talked to Matt about this many times because he's always thought that council should get paid more, get more people. Like my daughter says, well, most of the people on council are older now and don't have younger families, but to get people like me or people, younger people that have families, they expect to maybe get more because they're taking more time away from their families. And so she's all for it. But I said, well, I'm all for you getting a raise because I look at some of these cities that you're compared to, and I know how hard you work for our city and go to all the meetings and tend to all of them. And I was shocked at some of the differences of some of the cities where they were ranked compared to what you get paid. And so
Yeah.
I'm all for giving our mayor I don't know how much. That's not something I could decide, but you definitely, in my opinion, you'd raise. I'm fine with what I get. I enjoy doing what I do, and it's hard to say, yeah, I should get more money. It's kind of a hard thing for someone to.
It shouldn't cost you. I mean,
But
if you're
yeah.
going,
It can
looking at
cost
that, the
you.
rankings,
Right,
the mayor position, council's not, I mean, the ranking's not there for council.
no,
Council looking across the board is not as bad, but the mayor position is
right.
significantly.
What about,
Right.
re-implementing the use of the, funds that are available for you to use? Like you had, you talked about earlier, because, for one thing, I think that you are an exceptional mayor in the fact that you participate more than a lot of mayors that I've been familiar with. And so and I'm not saying to raise or not to raise right now, but to raise extensively that for someone in the future who may not do what you have, if we have something in place that corresponds with a little bit better with what's actually being done. So, maybe raise some, but reinstitute the use of the fund, like, for your mileage, for
Yeah.
different things.
Yeah, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't policy allow us to submit for like reimbursements if we attend conferences or things of that nature? I mean, And again, secondarily, I'm not against, I'm against raising my wages as a council member, but have no qualms taking and raising the mayor's. Again, it's just coming back with what is a fair and equitable number. I mean, Bob, did you have a number that you wanted to toss out, or?
To make it easy, because I don't want this to be a discussion, can I offer a suggestion? It really is in your hands. I've given you the information. Would you individually send a comment of what you think is fair to Brody? If he can work this, if we can. Comment.
Amber actually ran a few numbers just that we could throw out if everyone wants to hear them of what would. She did essentially a quick salary survey for lack of a better word.
So we did a salary survey last year, if you remember, for all of the part-time employees, and we included the mayor and council in that. So we had it all done, and then we just updated it with what they're doing right now. So given that, it ran currently the mayor's is 10,700 a year, and with the salary survey, it bumps that up to 17,600.
I think that's a little high personally. But I'm just saying.
And that's at Riverdale.
That's just using our typical cities that we use
Understand.
for salary surveys for everything else. The council, it went from $8,600 to 10,600, if you're interested in that one. One thing I would like to point out is we haven't done COLAs for many years, but we did last year, and it was decided to not give the council the COLA. I still suggest to give the council the COLA just because you don't want to keep falling behind. Every year that you say no, you keep dropping below. It's not a considerable amount of money. If we do the 5% COLA to the council members, it's only about $350 to $400 a year. But it keeps you from falling behind, which is going to affect who decides to run for council. You know, if we keep it at that $8,000 level and 10 years from now, it's still there. We just need to keep it up. So I don't think it needs to look at like you're giving your money back. I want it to look like we are keeping up with surrounding cities and getting qualified people that want to run, because it doesn't fall behind.
For the record, for the record, I didn't even know you got paid as a council member. I thought it was all just voluntary. So I feel like the kid in Meet the Coopers. I'm getting paid for this.
Yeah, it's not a lot. It's, you know, it really isn't either way.
And as I've talked to people, that's exactly what I've heard, and some of the experiences I've heard from other people over these last few years is turned into, if you kind of have it a little too much, then people are saying, yes, 2 council meetings a month, and I can, boy, I'm just rip that off, and that doesn't take much time and effort. So I realize there has to be a balance, but I'm definitely not for a raise for the council, but I do wonder if you could just re-implement the credit card concept so you could at least get some of the basics, you know, covered, which are intended, you know, it's intended to do that. And I think that would be a #1 very important place to start, because you do extra things than most mayors do. And that would, I think, be very appropriate.
But to compare you to the Riverdale and the South Ogden, where our population isn't even close, and to see how much their mayors make compared to you, I just feel that because you're not gonna be the mayor forever, obviously. And I just think that there needs to be some kind of an increase plus an accountable credit card when you do go travel and.
Well, let me offer this thought. Certainly there's a number on the table. I don't want to put you in a different spot, okay? But I think in all fairness, Brody, if they will make a recommendation, send it to Brody. Let him come in with Matt, okay, at our meeting. He'll work this piece up with you. He'll come with a recommendation, the basic. If you're agreeable to that, we'll move in that direction. And then Diane, to your point, I certainly can go back to a credit card. The reason why I walked away from it, because I think I was getting fairly compensated. And so me having to run to Salt Lake to my Wasatch Regional Council meetings, or me have to run up and down the Wasatch front of these meetings, I did, because I think I was being compensated well enough. And in all fairness to you, anytime I do anything with that credit card, I have a bunch of paperwork that I fill out, you know, and I says, I'll just eat my own cost, okay, to do that. Which is one of the reasons why I gave it back. But I can certainly come back to that. I mean, there has been some interesting things that I've been asked and be involved in that really, it was expensive, okay? And I did it willingly in large part because I think that's exactly what you expect from the mayor to do those things. And so I did those and I continue to do those, but I'm just telling you, it's eating, okay, into my retirement. So if you'll do that, just send him that information and then we'll work the piece about the credit card to see if we can do it. that
But
way.
maybe we can extend the conversation just another moment, like what's a 25% increase, or, because if we use it, a lot of times when we do increases, we think of it in a percentage wise and, maybe we step it up a stage.
25% is $2,500.
So that's gonna, and then that's gonna increase the benefits, proportionally. So maybe that gets it up to, 25% of the 14,575 is gonna be around, an 18 or,
And
I would support an adjustment for the mayor's position, but probably not for the council and looking
Right,
at how we
that's-
compare to cities comparable to
I
our
agree.
size.
I agree. with that.
And no part-time, no other part-time people have COLAs, right?
Yes, we give COLAs to
Oh, we
everyone.
do have
across the board.
COLAs to part-time as well. That still probably doesn't change my feeling about it, but but it's interesting because I had understood it to be different, so.
Yeah, otherwise we run into the same thing where we're trying to hire part-time help and we're, dollars behind every other city around us. So it's a much easier tool to keep up with.
Yeah, I can see how, and Lenny, we talked about it before at the whole, when we had the whole problem. A year.
5 years
a
on
year and
the
a half
planning
ago.
commission, I think I made $20 a meeting
That's it.
as a stipend, a
I
compensation.
think
So,
it's still that way, isn't it?
I mean, I didn't jump into this to make money. It's for the betterment of the city, but.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's the key. We all have accepted that. And I think that's a worthy, this has never been a profit mode. It was certainly not even being justified. I think I run the numbers, you could argue the same thing. $6 an hour? What's your time worth? And the fact.
Make that much?
That's $6 an hour.
Hey.
Well, I'm like with Randy. I remember when Marge B. Craft, when I talked to her. And then she's told me how much she made. I said, you get paid to be on the council? She said, yeah, my kids are like, I told my kids, they're like, you get paid. I had no clue. I didn't know neither that you got paid to be on the council. I just had Mike Pusey say, you need to be on the council. And I'm like, okay. And my kids are like, you have to run for that, Mom. I'm like, oh, you do? Like, I was clueless about all that. And then when you got paid, and yeah. So,
I think every one of us could basically say we never entered the calling of an elected position with the intent to make money. But certainly, Joe, as you suggested, it is about the service, about making positive changes. And certainly that's the moving part of that. My particular situation is that with all of the commitments and there are 25, 30 commitments every month I have to be to, we are certainly making a difference. Okay, and proof of that is 5,600. 5,600, I will tell you today, Ross may know this, but every UDOT person I have talked to said 5,600 should never have been widened for 4 more years. How that happened, okay, in large part, is because the delegation from Roy City went to the Capitol. We sat down with those leaders and basically presented an argument that talked about Northrop Grumman, talked about the Hillfield, talked about the museum, and talked about the current annual average daily traffic on there. And we had documentation to show that. And I'm telling you, those leaders stepped back. Even the UDOT director.
I've heard that from several legislators said that the argument from Roy was well presented, well prepared, and it's what pushed 5,600 from like number 30 to project number 1.
Exactly. In region 1. it
$200
became
million.
number 1. But it takes that kind of activity. It takes those kinds of things. And so whether we're working economic development down in the far parts of South Salt Lake, or whether or not we're basically involved with UDOT on a variety of issues, that becomes our responsibility. And remember, I don't think it's ever going to get any less, but could be more. All I'm suggesting is whether we basically help with a credit card that says, hey, we're going to make a run down there, that will do that. And by the way, Diane, to your point, I try not to if I can, I'll drag Matt with me because Matt has a car. And so I use his car. So he takes me down there when I can. But all my Wasatch Front Regional Council meetings, all my legislative meetings I have, Matt's not involved. And so it's a solo. And if I can get on a train, I'll take a train if I have to. but the point would be is that we have to keep the momentum. Roy is literally, I think, on the map in terms of what people think. And we got to keep that moving, okay? All of us have to keep that moving. And I'm only suggesting to you is that if 25% is the right number, perfect. Send your information to Brody. If that's where the start point is, or if that's the final part, just whatever you think is fair, then let's move in that direction and let's get this done. And then my commitment to you and commitment to the Roy residents would be is we'll keep the momentum going, okay? We are certainly making a big difference, okay?
And I don't say that number is a specific number, as you know, a yes or no, but just a place to start so we have an idea where things fit in, because I believe that making a change by a percentage is maybe a better way as opposed to throwing a dart.
Oh, I agree.
And, sort of, so.
Just talk to me and we'll kind of
Yep.
figure out where everyone is and.
So is my understanding you want to take out the 5% COLA for the council members? Or
You,
would you like to leave it in?
please don't misunderstand what I'm going to say here. You have to be compensated. You have to be compensated. The price of life is going up, and I don't like it. Personally, I'd love it to say, let's go back to what it was in 2016, but that's not reality anymore. I think if the 5% that's being proposed is across the board, and it is across the board, it's more fair in terms of making sure we're not dealing with these gaps. And I'm telling you, in the last 6.5 years, okay, there's been a gap, and we're trying to fix that gap today. Don't let that happen tomorrow, okay?
Yeah.
You say 5%, 5% is enough money to help you to compensate for all the things you're doing. And by the way, remember this, you're also attending the open houses. You're also attending those events when we have them. You're also out there involved with the public. It's not just coming to the 2 meetings a month. It's not about the 2 meetings a month. It's all the work you put in along the way. And more importantly, the engagement you're asked to be. Sophie, how many times you basically have to be in the parks? You're talking to people. If you start looking at just the things that you do in terms of your call as a city council member, you're starting to realize there's a lot of commitment on you. Take a look at your calendars and ask the question am I fairly being compensated for it? And then take a look at your peers. I mean, when I looked at Ogden and they have their 2 meetings months and they're punching out at 37,000. Those are not full-time mayor or full-time council. They are part-time council members. The bottom line is going to be, are you getting fairly compensated? 5% COLA is fair.
Yeah, as I say, as someone who is not coming up into an upcoming re-election campaign, I just worry about the optics for any of the current council members that are looking to run. Coming off of raising taxes plus voting yourself a raise, even if it is just 5%, the optics on it just look bad. And as far as like anybody that's currently sitting on the council, I'll say this on public record right now. I would love to keep the team together. Just because I think we work well. And I just don't want to see something as simple as a quote unquote raise being thrown as mud and potentially putting anybody's seat in jeopardy from a re-election perspective.
You're absolutely correct, Randy. And at the end of the day, you have to weigh all that in y'all's decision. Okay, you have to weigh it in there. But it doesn't take away in terms of what you're also asked to do. So think about it. You got to make a tough choice. So I don't have anything else to add. Okay.
I don't have any other questions that were sent to me either.
Is there anything else that need to be talked about in terms of the budget?
I would just say this, if everyone will just get with me for the mayors, we can kind of put that out and then I'll send an email out to the council and we'll make budget adjustments once everyone's kind of on the same page.
And so if that goes up, then something goes down, right? And so then you just look in to see where that will come out of it.
And it wouldn't be a significant amount, but it would be easy to, you know, it's not an exact science.
So one thing that I didn't shoot across, but kind of wanted to touch bases on, when we look at all the different like departments, we don't have anybody that's, we don't have a director of IT yet. if we look at how critically important IT is to the actual city, the internet goes down. If a building loses connectivity, anything of that nature, you know, we're beholden to basically we have an IT supervisor. So I'd want to kind of just toss it out there that we look at moving the IT supervisor position actually up to a formal director level position. And basically, you know, do away with the IT supervisor position, because when you look at the IT supervisor right now, they sit in every director meeting. They are basically making, and they have their own quote unquote budget, but it's rolled up and into city administration. So just kind of want to toss that out there for everybody to kind of think about as well.
That's an interesting conversation. Randy, to your point, I marked it down. It just needs to have dialogue. I'll tell you with that, Brody. One of the things you have to assess, and maybe you can work close with Randy in terms of that, it really needs to come from the city, okay, to the city council and says that makes sense. But ideally, you could argue that simply says the city council says just do it and then pick up the pieces. But I think you have to, your own mind simply says, does it fit within your organizational strategy? Does it make sense? Certainly IT is becoming a major issue, okay, in everything we do. The question would be is, do you need to have that position sitting at the table? And because whenever you raise the individual to a director level, they are considered now an at-will employee. And as an at-will employee, there's a contract issue. And more importantly, I hate to say this, but their ability to provide stability, employment stability changes a bit because at-will employees mean just that under the law.
I'd recommend just leaving it the way it is. I mean, the two IT employees we have do a pretty good job.
But there might be an argument.
Yeah, the dilemma
that supports that.
Right. The dilemma that you run into is both of our IT guys could walk out tomorrow and make almost twice what we're paying them now. So we need to be looking at like long-term career paths for them. And that's the thing is a director level position / title is the next like level from an IT supervisor. So again, the market will dictate that I could walk both of them out tomorrow into jobs paying almost twice what we're actually paying them now.
And that goes back to the heart of the issue about are we paying the right salary? And I think to Randy's point, and we've seen this certainly in our public safety, we've adjusted salaries in large part because of that. And here's the other part that Randy hasn't talked about, but certainly is an argument. Where's the next career growth in that position? Certainly to a supervisor, but from a supervisor where? And I don't have that answer.
Move to Roy, become the mayor.
Doesn't pay enough. I thought we just covered that. As I say, it doesn't pay enough. I thought we just barely covered that.
We were talking career.
But do me a favor, because I think with Joe's point, there needs to be more information. But talk to Randy. Maybe you can iron out at least maybe a look at this from a couple different perspectives before maybe you consider, or maybe you won't consider coming to the city council with a proposed change.
And you know, Randy, I think you bring up some really good points, and maybe it's something to consider to start thinking about, maybe not for this particular cycle, or maybe there are other ways to help improve it without going to that same jump, but appreciate you bringing that up. And I find myself thinking maybe not a dramatic change right now at this budget where we're at, but
Maybe
something
mid-year
to
adjustment.
consider something in the future on what else could be done to evaluate that. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, anything else, council? Staff, anything? Okay, here's the next step. Bottom line would be is unless there's something else in the conversation, at this moment, the third week in June, we will present the formal budget to the council for final approval. Hopefully everything we've talked about will be incorporated, the changes we've talked about. If there is anything along the way you think about, please get that in. But it'll be, do we have to go through a hearing? I think we have to have a hearing. So there'll be a public hearing section. And then from the public hearing, then we go to questions and a final vote. but we have to have it done in June by law. Unless we declare a truth and taxation meeting, which allows us to kick it into August.
Then there on that, we'll
And we don't need to.
pass on that.
Anything else? Did we miss anything? We okay? Okay. Hey, thanks. Appreciate it. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
How did I know that, y'all? Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Ann. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Y'all have a great day. Good meeting.
Thanks.
Great.
Stretching before you sit down.